So to continue on with sort of the Cannabis 101 talking points, you mentioned CBD and THC, and a lot of people have fear when approaching THC just because we've heard that it's the psychoactive component and it can have effects on and be sort of impairment to you. What would you recommend to somebody who's maybe looking to investigate that? Where do they start?
They could start by calling me, and I would refer them to a medical professional and get them seen by either a nurse practitioner or a medical doctor, and get their script. And then I would guide them to go slow, to start very, very low and go slow. And these doctors, of course, would give the same advice. And you've got to test your own body. You have to know your body, and what's good for me is not necessarily what's good for you, or what's good for Sean, or what's good for Betty down the street, because we're all unique. It's like our fingerprints. So what's good? So I take THC in micro doses, and I suggest that for the seniors that I know that are getting it from their grandchildren, make sure that you have good, safe quality, and seniors actually metabolize it differently than others. For those of us that take the oil or drops under our tongue. And I don't really advocate smoking anything. If one likes the dried flower, which I do, I think I would suggest vaporizing it, because vaporizing cannabis is 95% smoke-free and carcinogen-free too.
So let's talk about, you've touched on a couple of consumption methods. Let's talk about what options are out there for somebody who wants to consume cannabis, how they can take it, and maybe the benefits of each one versus the other. So we know that there's smoking and vaping that you mentioned. So what are the benefits for somebody who's medicating that way?
Right, there are benefits. Smoking, some people do both. They actually get up in the morning. If they live with chronic pain, they get up and they will vaporize their cannabis, and also take a gel cap or a capsule or oil, whatever their preference is.
Is that because smoking will work a little faster while the oil or the capsule kicks in a bit later?
That's exactly right. So inhaled cannabis, one feels the effects almost immediately. When one takes it in oil form, for instance, depending on your metabolism, for me, I feel the effects after an hour and a half, after 90 minutes. A person that would be a senior, for instance, I've seen a woman, it took actually 4 hours for a small, minute amount of cannabis oil to be felt for her. So it depends. And what I take every day could, put a 400-pound, person on the floor. So it doesn't matter. And what he or she takes, it's like we're all so unique. So we have to be careful. And there is a problem now, a growing problem, because seniors are the growing population of cannabis consumers. And if they're getting these, brownies or trying to make their own and they don't know what they're doing, they could end up in the hospital, or they could have horrible panic that's caused by the THC. So one has to be very, very careful with the THC.
Yes.
And I agree that research on cannabis still needs to be continued so people can know the specific THC and CBD percentages that benefits them.
Right, and that's in their product, right? And a lot of this, the government cannabis, it has the percentages on it, but it's really lacking. And when you go to talk to somebody in person, you learn about the different terpenes, which are other constituents, the terpenes and the trichomes, and you can smell it. And people love to be able to choose, to have choice, and talk to people about their symptoms. And in this industry, I've never seen so much kindness and respect, and people helping people, and patients helping patients. And I know people that can afford it, but they are given donations from others, or people that are living with horrible pain due to cancer and grief too, for instance. Unfortunately, I've been to 5 funerals of my friends' children who have died by opioids, not cannabis. And how it starts is, a 19-year-old goes to the dentist for a root canal, and dentist puts them on Percocets. Well, people can get addicted to that very, very quickly. That's opioids, or Tylenol 3s too. So now the doctors are minimizing their prescriptions. You asked that before.
Yes.
Why are doctors still prescribing it? They still have to. We need Tylenol 3s and we need Percocets, but in short term and in very, very small amounts and for a short duration, because one can get addicted to opioids in I think 5 to 7 days. And then so the doctor doesn't renew the script. Kid goes on the street to get fake Percocets or fake Tylenol 3s or fake pain relief, and it could be contaminated with fentanyl. Now, 1 granule of fentanyl can kill a person. And these moms that I know that had to bury their children just walked into the bedroom and found their son, 3 sons in this. I had 3 and 2 daughters, 5 altogether. 1 is too many right now. And as I said before, if we have 11 Canadians dying every day of opioids, prescription opioids, then we got to look at cannabis as an alternative, because this opioid crisis now is an epidemic far worse than AIDS in the 1980s and SARS in the 1990s. And right now the government's not talking about it. And I think that will be on the platform for this next federal election. I certainly hope it is, because we have to start talking about cannabis. And we were prohibited for 90 years talking about cannabis, and now, hence the reason for my little business endeavor here. Let's Talk Cannabis. I want to encourage people that if I'm not telling you to take cannabis, I'm telling you, please consider it as an option. Please understand the facts. Please look at it as harm reduction.
So Sherry, you talked a little bit about cannabis and from the seniors' perspective. What about from a parent's perspective? How do you talk about cannabis with your kids, or discuss the differences between medicinal use and maybe recreational use, and how do you approach that subject?
Yeah, it's a good question, and we all agree that any kind of drug, and cannabis, is not good for anyone under the age of 25. Because our brains are not well developed by then. So, but if your child has cancer, or if your child has 300 seizures a month, then people need to understand that this is medicine that can be an option. Mm-hmm. So, but generally for most of us, I would love to teach children at a very young age. I think it should be taught early in grade 4 and 5, how to grow it. Learn about how to grow the plant in biology. Let's teach our kids to learn how to be chemists, and let's do it in our science projects. Let's let the children know what's medicine and what isn't, and what is to be avoided, and what is to be used with care for medicinal purposes. I'd love to see the next generation want to go to med school, learn how to be cannabinoid specialists, learn about cannabinoid medicine, learn how to be pharmacists or chemists, study it, learn how to be horticulturists, learn how to grow it correctly. Because growing it, for instance, it's not just like you put a seed and it grows, right? These are magnificent, wondrous plants that need care, and one needs to understand how to do it. I understand that one male plant can wipe out a whole field of female plants, for instance, because of the females are the cannabis, the plants that create the buds, the medicine. So one really needs to understand how to do it correctly. So Sean just posted actually a series of blog posts on our letstalkcannabis.ca platform. A hydroponic company up in Belleville that has done some YouTube videos on how to grow your own legally and safely at home. And he was growing plants that reached 9 feet, wow. 9 feet by 7 feet wide. I think mm-hmm. 9 feet tall, and these are the people we need to learn from. These are craft cannabis growers, people that have the experience. and understand the genetics and understand it as medicine and the powerful plant that it is. We need to learn from the experts. And while I'm on that topic too, I was up in the Belleville area a couple of weeks ago, actually twice in the last 2 months, to my friends in the Mohawk territory in the Tyendinaga Reserve. And I'll tell you, the indigenous communities know how to grow this plant. They know how to do it right. You know, they've been doing it for thousands and thousands of years. They understand plant medicine, and they have it regulated. They have it down to a science, and they understand how to do it well. So I really think we should learn from the indigenous communities. I think we should learn from the craft cannabis growers that have been on the front lines for years, and I really would like the government policy makers to understand that it's not in anyone's best interest to make these laws and decisions if one doesn't have any personal experience. If some of these people making the rules don't understand it, they need to experience cannabis before they to understand all the layers and to understand the correct facts, basically, on so many levels.
I agree with that.
So yeah, but growing your own, and it's not a possibility for a lot of people, because they live in apartment buildings or in places that they can't. So
or physically being able to manage a grow like that, especially if you're sick and you're using it as a medicine, there's probably maybe a limitation that you'd face in being able to do something like that for yourself.
Right.
Is there a benefit to maybe growing your own cannabis rather than purchasing your own cannabis?
Well, cost. Okay, so if you grow your own, I think the cost works out to be under $1 a gram, depending on, once you get to know it. And what you would need is the correct tools, the soil, and then the nutrients that go in it. And people don't realize you just can't use Miracle Grow on your cannabis plants. You need to understand the correct toxic-free or poisonous-free nutrients and fertilizers and pest control to use. It's medicine, right? And like I said before, whether one takes it recreationally or medicinally, your body doesn't know the difference. So whatever you're going to do, however you choose to do it, make sure you do it safely and you know what you're doing. If you want to learn how to grow it in your backyard legally, I'll refer you to someone who can show you. If you would like to get a doctor's authorization or authorization privately by a nurse practitioner over a secure telehealth network, I'll refer you to someone. And you can be in any part of Canada. I now have a really strong network of professionals from diverse backgrounds, and people that understand formulations, and people that know how to make cannabis oil and cream to use topically for joint pain or arthritis and that sort of thing. That's something that I just started to use recently as topical pain relief with THC and CBD mixed with olive oil, and I think this community uses beeswax in it too. Yes. And it's a very good pain relief to use topically for joint pain or muscles and that sort of thing.
How does the cream work? Does it just go through your pores? And
yeah, it does. It gets absorbed in through our
we have receptors in our skin,
cannabinoids receptors. Okay. Yes.
And it's funny you say that. I recently just as well started topical applications to complement sort of my oil ingestion that I've been doing, and love it. I will never go back.
Right.
And sort of probably a very similar formula. There's a mixture of CBD and THC and a beeswax base with some essential oils, and you can make it yourself.
Right.
I didn't this time. It was a gift to try out, and I'm loving it and can't wait to explore more. But it really does, for muscle pain, to sort of ease that. I've got pain in my knee from that car accident so many years ago, and it limits me sometimes in what I'm able to do. Even physiotherapy, you can't do the therapy very long if you're in that much pain, but a little topical application, a little bit of stretching, and I can implement those therapies to greater effect, in my opinion.
Right.
So
and
right back to
when
balance.
one is in pain, your sleep is disrupted, right?
Very much
I
so.
mean, and if you can't get any sleep, you cannot heal from anything unless you get sleep. So for one reason and one reason alone, investigate the possibility of taking cannabis for sleep. And it's much better, especially in the senior community where people are getting sleeping pills, addicted to sleeping pills, and in addition to their, pain medications and blood pressure blood thinners and that sort of thing, right? It's just, as we get older in history, we've just been getting layers and layers and layers of drugs piled on us. And then, I'd really love to see cannabis offered in all retirement facilities, and it's here. I mean, it's going to be coming, but it's not yet. There are some retirement facilities now that I know that allow it if one has a medical authorization, but there's issues, and people need to understand how to consume it correctly. And the difference between medicine and poison is dosage. So it's so important to understand the dose that you're taking, the dose that you need, and to be guided by your doctor or healthcare professional, because it's complicated, and as I said, it's different for everybody. And so I'm going to start a series of educational seminars in senior homes and retirement residences, and just impress upon the point, well, you may be able to minimize your antidepressants and your sleeping pills and your blood pressure medication, but do not do it alone. Make sure you get the guidance of a doctor, and this will give better health outcomes, I believe, for most people. Not for everybody, but given the fact that we all have this system, every human being on the planet. Now, the more I know about this, I'm just convinced that we cannot rule it out anymore. And we also, as I said before, we cannot ignore the voices of the patients and those with lived experience. And so this issue too about impairment, while we're talking about it, I agree, no one should arrive to work impaired. No one. But this idea of banning, the police officers, for instance, or they're not allowed to consume cannabis, I believe 28 days before their shift. I ask myself, does that mean that police officers can't take their medicine? I know a lot of police officers that have PTSD, and they may need to vaporize from time to time, or they may need cannabis to treat their anxiety or depression. So I don't see this as something is going to have to, I don't see that will work. I also learned recently that just because I could have THC today and not touch it, and I would still have THC in my system probably 30 days from now, and maybe 300 days from now, maybe during my lifetime. I read something, University of Sydney, I believe it was, that talked about something called THC re-intoxication. So because it is stored in our fat cells, it can be released at a later date, I think, and maybe it wouldn't give us the impaired reaction, but maybe it would. I don't know. So, as I've said several times, being able to have a device to measure impairment is what we need, not just a device that measures a substance in our bodies, right? So I worry that the courts are going to be challenged. I worry that the police will be caught up in court dealing with these issues of shutting down dispensaries and cannabis related issues. I'd love to see them focus on perhaps the amount of fentanyl coming out through China and killing people in massive amounts, massive numbers, and nobody's talking about that yet. So that's what I'd like to say. Sorry, I'm talking too much again, as usual. Questions? Any questions you have?
Sean, did you have a question?
Do you have any?
I guess, I don't know, maybe to bring up another subject. Well, or actually on the lines of that, with cannabis in the workplace,
Right.
Because I used to work jobs where they'd actually make me sign in the contract before I worked, where I wouldn't be able to ingest cannabis 12 hours before my shift.
Really?
So as you were saying with the police officer, it's
Wow.
28 days.
Wow.
So yeah, I could see that being a really big problem for the people that need their medicine immediate and are
Right.
suffering.
Right.
So I wonder if there'll ever be some type of kind of intervention to tell people that cannabis is medicine and they need it while they're working, or otherwise they may not be able to do their job efficiently.
Yeah, and I hope that's the case. I hope people start to really, really think about this, because for me, cannabis helps me function. It helps me focus. It helps me lead a semi-normal life. I mean, to the extent I
The
can.
new normal.
Yeah, well, because I lost 20 years of my life. I felt like I was in a coma, after a horrible series of traumatic events, right? And so, yeah, I was around and I was alive and I went, but I just felt like I was on autopilot for so many years, taking these antidepressants and sleeping pills. And so I'm so passionate about this subject because cannabis gave me back my life, really. And I was very, very depressed for a long time. And I've met so many wonderful people too that have had similar experiences. So in contrast to the pharmaceutical medications that we were on before. So I don't say it's for everybody, but I say everybody should consider it. Yeah, and there are people that have allergies, and there are people that can't tolerate THC at all. And that's fine. There are some people that can't tolerate peanuts either, right? But for the general population, cannabis should be considered now as a frontline treatment before opioids, if possible, if all other options fail.
Well, I definitely agree with you. I think at least patients or individuals should have a choice.
Right.
Rather than,
right.
like, they should be able to have a choice of seeing alternative medicine and seeing if that actually benefits them.
Exactly.
It may not, but at least if they have the choice.
Right. Right.
It could.
And what you're going to hear on this podcast over time, we're not going to tell you how to make money in the stock market, and we're not going to talk about the economics of cannabis and how to make money in business. We're going to talk about the real human impact, the real human component of cannabis. And I'll tell you, it helps. It helps people, just understand things from a different perspective and help people get through or manage their pain so that they can get some relief, some sleep, and heal. I mean, it's not the cure-all for everything, but it sure helps to minimize suffering. And even those bereaved parents that I know who have had to bury their children, cannabis can help with grief too. And I mean, nothing can cure grief. But I'm saying that just somehow cannabis, this plant is, we're able to, it takes the edge off suffering. That's what I would say. So that's my opinion and from my personal experience. And I choose to have cannabis in my system every single day for the rest of my life. And I'm actually trying to, the more I know about THC, I'm trying to increase my dosage of THC to have as much as possible without impairment. But that also takes time and it takes knowledge. We have to understand what we're doing, and it's my choice. And I believe my health outcomes will be a lot better than having to be on the antidepressants and sleeping pills. So that's, is that your feeling too? And we do need those from time to time too, sure. I don't say don't ever have any pharmaceuticals, but opioids kill people. And the reason why cannabis doesn't, it's because something to do with, the pathway, cannabis does not affect the pathway to our brain that regulates our heart rate, our breathing, and our heart. So I think when, in contrast, opioid or fentanyl just shuts down everything. You go to sleep and that's it, right? Cannabis, it's impossible for cannabis to kill anyone. Cannabis alone, So another thing, we're back in the media now, and what do we hear? No, the rates of drunk driving or impaired driving didn't go up, and if it did, it was alcohol related. It wasn't cannabis related. If we look, the sky didn't fall since October the 17th. Where are we now here? This is June, right? What's the date today? We're into June, and the sky didn't fall the day of legalization. Everything, the world is still going around, and impaired driving hasn't risen. And I think that still 2/3 of those of us that take cannabis do not disclose it for obvious reasons, because the stigma is still around. But I think over time you're going to find more and more people coming forward to tell their stories, and I encourage everyone to do so. And if one doesn't want to be on camera or to tell their story, we can write into Sean anonymously, or you can ask us questions anonymously, and we'll find a way. You don't ever have to give us your name, your email. We'll point you in the right direction, because so many people out there are in need of help, and so many people are in pain.
Sharing stories, whether anonymously or using your own name. It helps sort of you, for me, it helps me sort of process how cannabis was working for me, and was it working, and what I liked about it. It made me take a look at my own use, and as well, I found the more stories I read from people like me empowered me and encouraged me and educated me as to what was out there. So continuing in that platform and posting about it and getting the education out. People are reading it. You never know who you're going to affect. And there's groups out there that are doing it in amazing ways. One group I love in particular is She Can. She Can changed the game for me at the beginning of my journey. It's a private group on Facebook founded by Ashley Brown, and women, mostly women, connect there and share their questions, share their stories, and get responses from other women in the spaces, other patients and experts that are included in the group. And I think I learn more there on a daily basis than almost anywhere else, just from sharing information, and also it's a great place of support.
That's right.
Getting support on your journey when maybe you can't talk about it with your traditional channels, like your parents perhaps, or your siblings, or your friends,
or your spouses,
if you can't get it there, platforms like She Can are fantastic.
They're amazing. And often they're talking about specific conditions, like women will get together and talk about, how can I help my fibromyalgia or my sleep disruption, or and issues like, I got to go to the States next week, what do I do? I'm terrified to go across the border, like issues like that. There's so many issues, and I love that platform because it's a safe place for people to talk anonymously, and it's not all over Facebook. It's a private forum, so that's good. And hopefully over time more and more people will come out and talk publicly about it, and that will happen.
And is cannabis specifically talked on? She Can?
So She Can is spelled SHECANN. So a brilliant Ashley coined that phrase, right? And it's a wonderful group, and a couple of nurse practitioners that I know belong to that group too, and the wealth of knowledge that comes out of there is just you can't compare. It's just amazing. And then we have Strain Print again too. You can tell everybody.
She Can is partnered with Strain Print. Medicinal My Way is also a very proud partner of Strain Print, which you talked previously about microdosing and finding the right dosage for yourself. And a big component of that is tracking your medicine. So tracking how much you're using, when you're using it, how you feel at the outset, how you feel afterwards, and that can be a little daunting for just about anybody. But Strain Print created an app for your phone, and you input what you're taking, how much you're taking, all of the they've partnered with LPs and they've got all the products listed there. You input what you're taking, why you're taking it, so what symptoms you're treating, how much you took, and it prompts you 90 minutes later to answer, how are you feeling now? You rated your anxiety at a level 7. What do you feel now? Oh, maybe it's a 2. So I know that 0.5 milliliters of this specific oil hitting at a level 7 anxiety in 90 minutes brings it down to a 2. Okay, so next time maybe I bring it up a little bit. And all that data you can review, you can share it with your doctor, and it just helps sort of find that perfect level, I think, for yourself. And the start low, go slow still applies, but incrementally tracking it that way gives you that bigger picture to know where you stand.
And some people will say, well, if this doesn't work, try it this way or try that way. And so they give you really good advice.
Mm-hmm.
And, instead of, halving your doses, why don't you quarter it or try that? Or like something you may not have thought of in the first place. That's why community, I believe so strongly we can't go through life alone. We need community. And that's what we're trying to build with Let's Talk Cannabis, like a community of people who want to learn. And we learn from each other, really. So it's great. And when one is in pain or suffering, you often feel isolated and you think, oh, I'm the only one on the planet that's going through this. But having a group to talk to or having a place to talk about your issues is just, it's fantastic. So bravo to Ashley Brown and She Can.
And all the She
and
Can
also
team.
Strain Print too. What a great idea. Now, having said that, there are issues though with confidentiality. People are really freaked out about going to the U.S. border.
Mm-hmm.
And I have some elder clients that are snowbirds. They like to go to Florida for the winter. And they say, I don't want to take cannabis oil because they're going to see at the border. So they're terrified to go back. And it shouldn't be like that. These ladies, so now what's happening is they're finding doctors in Florida so they don't take any medicine across the border and they get a prescription once they're down there, right? But it's all, it seems a long way to go to get your medicine. Or like lots of issues have to happen in order to get your medicine. But when you find the correct dose and the correct strain, it's just life-changing.
It can be.
It can be, so. And so it's very, very good. So I think the correct education should be taught to children at a very, very young age, and we need to have their peers talk to them too. What do you think? Did you get any cannabis education when you were going to school? It was too long ago for me. I can't remember.
Well, no, like you said earlier, it was kind of referred to as the devil. It was something you wanted to stay away from. It's like the gateway drug. You're going to do that. You're going to do every other type of drug. So there was definitely no education behind it. But I feel like now teaching kids like what THC is or THC does, what CBD does, the differences. I feel like they'll be more maybe aware and maybe do their own research into cannabis before actually consuming it.
Right.
Whereas I feel like as when I was a kid, there was no research, so there was no.
Was there anybody on the block, like in grade 6, like passing around joints, or in your school, or no?
No, not
grade 6.
Not that.
Well, sometimes, I've heard that before.
You're so little then.
Sometimes I've heard that. I've heard.
Maybe more like high school, but.
In high school too, but it's unfortunate, but it's here. I mean, it's everywhere, and people, the children are the ones that know the most about it, frankly. Unfortunately, it is in the school. It's in the schools. Mm-hmm. It's in the schoolyard. It's everywhere.
Well, just even media, I noticed. Just seeing it in the media might encourage maybe a child or even a senior to do their own research, because I find the more I see it, like Let's Talk Cannabis, the more we see it, the more people are going to become comfortable with it and want to talk about it and do the research.
Right.
So I think it's just we're at a point where it's a matter of time before people wake up and start respecting the idea that this is a medicine and that it should be taken seriously.
Right.
And I've heard there's states in states in the United States that are decriminalizing it and making it legal now, and I've recently heard a story in Thailand of how they're trying to legalize it as well. Right. So I feel like legalization in Canada is starting to.
It's coming.
Making the world think about, okay, cannabis can be a medicine, and let's use it.
But my concern, Canada, Thailand, and Israel are the big countries that are leading the science, in my opinion. But I worry about this, what we're hearing about in the news now, is that they're going to be doing research on synthetic cannabis and not the actual plant. So that is a problem for me, and it could skew everything, and then we're getting more fake media and more so I'm really encouraging us all to speak out if we hear that they're doing research on synthetic cannabis. That really, I get warning signs, or I feel that we should alert people to use their critical thinking skills when you're reading a piece in the media, and do your research. and understand synthetic cannabis is not whole plant cannabis. It's not the same, right?
Someone be able to tell the difference between synthetic cannabis?
You have to be educated after, yes, if they're with education and if they know, yes. But most people know. The answer is right. Most people, I don't think, know, right? So, yeah, there's exciting times and there's scary times, but the answer to everything is education, and I believe dialogue. Let's talk about it and let's disagree, and unless if you don't want to take it, fine. But I would say I don't care for anyone making blanket statements that all cannabis is bad or it's a gateway drug. No, I believe cannabis is an exit drug. It helps people reduce their alcohol consumption and their opioid consumption and blood pressure medication if wanted, under the supervision of a doctor, of course. So, yeah, I just think, there's just too much stupidity. Is that a word? Stupidity going on? There's stupid comments everywhere, and I've heard some from police officers, from like as I said, highly educated people, and some politicians, frankly, and I wish that they would just research the subject first before they go and make these policies and that sort of thing. But no, cannabis has been here for thousands and thousands of years as medicine. In the 1930s, they couldn't demonize the word cannabis because doctors were prescribing it back then. They were prescribing cannabis. And they demonized the word marijuana because it sounded Mexican at the time. And so the whole prohibition is based on non-scientific, horrendous, racist propaganda that we were fed. That's how it happened in North America. And I think that it's very... yeah, we have our friends here next. That's good. Welcome. So I think that when one learns the truth, one becomes appalled. And why did it become prohibited? Because it got in the way of big business, frankly. It got in the way of, because it used to be used for pulp and paper and construction, and we had it in our food supply. And so, yeah, it was just... the stories are horrible. One of my favorite books is a book called Chasing the Scream, written by a journalist called Johann Hari. And it's a fascinating must-read for everybody. And he interviews people in the talks about why the war on drugs was an assault basically on people. And mostly indigenous families, black families, and Hispanic families ruined from one small amount of cannabis. And yeah, you can never repair that. I think when you learn that we're talking in Canada now about truth and reconciliation for our indigenous communities, and yeah, we also need truth and reconciliations for all those innocent families that were ruined by prohibition. So prohibition kills people, not cannabis.